Donald Trump's latest tariffs on India, effective August 27, have set off alarm bells in New Delhi and Washington alike. Former Indian diplomats warn the move risks undermining trust in the US, even as India remains a vital technology partner and home to cutting-edge American R&D centers. Others argue the tariffs are less about economics and more about Trump wielding trade as a political weapon, projecting toughness abroad. Critics see the measures as confusing, protectionist, and contradictory, closing markets rather than opening them. Some call it India's moment for reform, others a dangerous gamble. Here is what the experts had to say about Trump's tariffs on India.
We are an overall trade deficit country. With the US, we have a trade surplus. It's a very important technology partner. In civilian technologies, China is imposing restrictions from all reports. It has recalled engineers who have come to India as part of various collaboration projects. Russia has strength in defense technology, but not in civilian technology. So US will remain an essential partner for India. Similarly, the US, even if it tries to normalize the relationship with China, even if it does a trade deal with China, sees that its main economic, technological, and military competition is with China. Now, to deal with that competition, US leaders, US companies, and I've heard that from them, believe that India will be an important partner for them. Just as an example, there are 1,700 global capability centers in India. 60% of them belong to US companies, and they are doing cutting-edge R&D and technology development work for the global operations for multinational companies, not just for the Indian operations. 20% of the global talent in semiconductor design is in India. So for the US also, if it wants to maintain its global leadership in innovation in many areas, India will be a leader.
Well, I think there is a complicated set of rationales for these tariffs, not the specific ones on India, but generally Donald Trump's love for tariffs. I think certainly he believes that a current account deficit, trade deficit, is evidence that other countries are taking advantage of the United States rather than, they're buying goods, they're sending goods cheaply to the United States, which the US consumer benefits from. So this has been an old view of his, right from, Japan in the 1980s. And he has always believed that tariffs are a way of leveling the playing field. A second factor has been, more recently, the view that somehow tariffs will be a tax paid by outsiders and not by the US consumer, and therefore it's a cheap way of getting revenues, which can then help offset some of the tax cuts that he has made. A third one, which you see a lot of nowadays, is it's punitive. So it can be a way for the US to essentially use force when it doesn't want to use its military. So I think there's some aspects of each of these in the tariffs that are applied to different countries. And unfortunately, of course, the reality is that other countries suffer.
Well, I would just say that emotions and nostalgia should not be taken as part of strategy. The time right now is of great volatility and uncertainty. You are going to see this for the next at least 2 to 3 years. US is, with the Trump administration, shooting itself in its foot. There is no doubt that it is seeing what was last seen in the US in the 1970s, an effect of inflation and also a recession. And the US economy clearly will struggle, which will have ramifications all over the globe. We are still linked to the dollar markets. As much as we want to de-dollarize, all of this would take time. But I think one of the critical factors right now is this is clearly India's moment to undertake some serious structural internal reforms, make our industries more competitive. And if we don't do that, our resilience will make ourselves to become more vulnerable to not be able to negotiate in multilateral agreements. My concern right now is that we don't have a lot of leverage. See, Trump acted exactly the same way with China. He came very hard on China. China came back at the Trump administration. The issue is that their imports into the US market are very inelastic. There are not many substitutes. And Trump can afford to take a hardened stand and may continue doing so till just order to ensure more submissiveness. So we are right to exercise restraint, to ensure balance, try restarting relationships with our neighbors. But we are also at a position that we are not having a lot to do in our international markets, whether in South Asia and Southeast Asia. And that to me is concerning.
I agree with that. I think Donald Trump gets one thing right. He understands that the post-World War II, post-Cold War Bretton Woods system, rules-based international order, is falling apart. And as in 1945 and as in 1991, he thinks that the United States ought to step up and re-engineer that global order. Unfortunately, his vision is a hub-and-spoke arrangement with the United States always at the center, involved in very favorable bilateral trade relations with India, with China, with Japan, with Canada, with Mexico, etc. And there's some logic to that, but it's dysfunctional. It's counterproductive because it's alienating America's good friends and allies, not only in geoeconomic terms, reciprocal tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers and things like that, but also in geopolitical terms. The friendship between India and the United States, which had been growing and which leaders on both sides had been building for the last 20, 25 years, is now, if not in danger, certainly going through a period of turbulence. And we see India rationally pursuing its own national interest, gravitating a little bit more towards Russia in certain respects, mending some fences and rebuilding some bridges with China to some extent, and moving away from the United States, not radically, but in a way that clearly signals that this is a counterproductive kind of approach geopolitically. So I think Trump gets it sort of right. You're right. The language of weaponization, I think, is correct. That resonates with me. He's correct that the old order is dead and the new one is struggling to be born. And as Antonio Gramsci once reminded us, that is a time of monsters. And this is a time of monsters.
Look, most of the trade from India to US are largely small players. There's no bigger player involved here, right? And that's the problem in the whole thing, that, these gems and jewelry guys, these agri commodity, these apparel guys, they do not have the wherewithal to forget lobbying with the US government. They can't even lobby well with the Indian government, right? I think that is part of the problem here, that they have been the kind of the casualty of this whole fight, that, okay, what all we can let go. India thought, well, let's save the market, but let go of whatever limited that they are doing, right? So that's it's a conscious call. India took a call that, okay, we'll lose some bit of this 85 billion. Okay, maybe about 30, 40 billion is seriously at risk, but let's absorb this, but not open the rest of the economy. Let me now quickly address some of the points that other members made. Look, I've been repeatedly coming on different channels raising this point. I think Indian government needs to be a little more transparent with its own audience. We have all understood the red lines. I don't understand the green lines so far. What sectors were they willing to open completely? Harley Davidson was at 150% tariffs. After so much of heckling, India reduces that to 70%. Like, that's not a open market. Tesla sells it in Mumbai. It was launched with much fanfare. 70% to 100% tariffs on Tesla. That's not an open market. Let's first acknowledge this. Where will India retaliate? The tariffs are all at 150% already. They are prohibitive. India imports only what it wants to import. The engines that will go into Tejas, you can't tariff them. You need them, right? The medical equipments that your hospitals use, you don't tariff them. You need them. So the point is, let's acknowledge first that Indian economy is a closed economy. Having pushed, and look, by the way, I'm saying this with a very patriotic fervor, right? But let's acknowledge the facts. And this was a moment where India was pushed to a corner. What can you open? And India says, sorry, let me close even the couple of windows that were open. So we have chosen the path to protect and close down even further. There's no shying away from this, right? We still, and name a sector where you say that India is absolutely open.
And there are many reasons why trade negotiations with Trump are so difficult. The first is the personality of the president himself. He's somebody who clearly changes his mind often, thinks one thing one day, another thing the next day. The other is that the tariffs are designed to accomplish multiple goals, many of which are mutually incompatible. So they're designed in part to be a source of revenue for the United States government, which would require making them in some sense permanent. But they're also designed in some cases to try and get more favorable trade deals from other countries, which would require them not being permanent. And then sometimes they're designed or aimed at other political goals. So for example, as we know in the case of India in trying to choke off or lessen Russia's oil revenue. So you mix this all together and it's very hard to negotiate. It's very hard to come to deals with Trump in particular. And yes, I mean, for the world's one-time leading advocate of free trade to say we're not doing free trade anymore, obviously that's incredibly damaging to the United States' reputation as a champion of free trade. Yes.
Well, quite frankly, these additional tariffs leave the largest importer of Russian energy, which is China, untouched, and Europe also untouched. Both imported more, China imported more Russian oil, $10 billion more than India in 2024. Europe imported goods worth $67 billion. And there are special carve-outs for countries like Hungary, Slovenia, Czechia to continue to get Russian energy. And India imported less than either of these. So it appears to us that, just putting tariffs on a single country like India is not going to impact Russia's behavior. What it will impact is the level of trust between India and the United States, because it introduces an element of disruption in the relationship. When Prime Minister Modi visited the US after President Trump was sworn in, both countries agreed to set a target of $500 billion worth of trade. Instead of that, we are going backwards. So obviously for us, this is both puzzling. Why has this been done? And also unreasonable. It really appears to us unreasonable, especially when the US is, commenced talks with Russia and has been discussing the possibility of US investments in Russia's critical minerals, energy sector, and so on. Again, targeting India for what other countries are doing is not going to have an impact on Russian behavior.
This administration's been very forward-leaning. You could say high risk on trying to reset the United States economic, political relationship with allies around the world. What is an open question still is is that reset what's the sequence of events here? Is it, a lot of people are saying, is he trying to get a big, beautiful deal with China and simultaneously being tough on his partners? Or is it the case, which I think is the more likely event, that the president and his administration really want to get a few things in order before they take China head on more directly for some more fundamental challenges? I think that's also at the root of why we're seeing India targeted on these Russian oil tariffs and not China yet. I think the key word there is yet.